Ji. I'm sure, like many others, thoroughly enjoyed your frank, forthright, and courageous speech. But tell us frankly, are you in any way concerned or anxious about what will happen to you when you reach Russia? If not, then democracy to that extent is working in Russia.
I'm not sure I can buy this logic. Yeah, Russia is not North Korea, hopefully yet. It's not Zimbabwe. But unfortunately, if you consider the quality of Russian democratic institutions, we're definitely worse than Venezuela. I doubt that you will say that Chavez regime is a democratic one. Also, unlike in Russia, opposition could win elections in the capital and in the two largest regions of the country. And they even have an opposition television channel. Yeah, the modern dictatorships, they are different because they're not based on the Iron Curtain policy. And the Putin's regime is based on the ability of Russian ruling elite to keep their money in the Western banks. So it's a silver lining. So he keeps opposition under control. We're not allowed to speak publicly. The television has, as they recognize, so-called the stop lists or the blacklists. But at the same time, he needs very much to keep this so-called image of a democratic leader. I hope that you are not expecting to get a proof of Putin's evil intentions to destroy democracy with the actual shooting of Russian opposition leaders. I've been saying the same things at Russian streets, on CNN interviews, at all the business conferences, at any opportunity given to me, expressing my views, you say strongly, strong views on Putin, on his policies, and I wish I have a chance to open a dialogue in my country. I also want to say that all these talks about Putin's enormous popularity in Russia, they, in my view, are not founded on a scientific data, because I'm sure Saddam Hussein was very popular, or Stalin was very popular, but in the police state, relying on the opinion polls run by the state-controlled agencies may not be very accurate. Just imagine that the telephone call is made to a person who was born in the Soviet Union, still has this genetic fear of KGB, and a stranger asks you, what do you think about Mr. Putin? Do you expect a realistic answer? And that's what explains the huge gap between the responses about Putin or Medvedev now and the responses of the same people about general state of the economy. The moment you ask the same people general questions, the gap, 20–30%, becomes obvious. I always believed, and I still believe, 2 weeks of an open debate on Russian television will change dramatically the situation. So that's why Putin regime makes it impossible for us to carry the message through, and they understand that the lie is the only shield of the regime, which is, again, by my standards, you may disagree, probably the most corrupt regime ever in the history of Earth because of the size of Russia and the amount of money that was taken away from our country and invested in the infrastructure of the rest of the world.
Mr. Kasparov, my name is Rahul Bajaj. I'm a member of the Upper House of Indian Parliament. I also enjoyed your speech, and I'm 100% with you in a desire for democracy without getting into details of the degrees and levels and types of democracy. I know almost nothing about Russia, so my question to you is, I appreciate your desire for democracy, and I would agree that the kind of democracy even the US or India has does not exist in Russia. That's obvious when Putin can appoint Medvedev as president and himself as prime minister and God knows what. But what happened after Gorbachev, to which Civil made a reference earlier in his talk, and with perestroika and glasnost, and to us outsiders it appeared the dictatorial state almost collapsed. And the Russians didn't like it. The shelves were empty. Jobs were not available. The present situation, if it has to convert into democracy, how would you suggest we avoid what happened which led to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
I mean, are you, just to make sure I understand, are you referring to Yeltsin's years? You know, are you referring to so-called tumultuous 90s? The chaos of the 90s, which Mr. Putin often referred to as the explanation of his Iron Fist policies?
Partly, but again to repeat, because I'm not very well aware of the Russian political situation, whether it's the Yeltsin situation with his weaknesses and drinking, et cetera, and loss of power, or perestroika and glasnost of Gorbachev. The point I'm making, or question I'm asking, Mr. Kasparov, is there's a feeling, at least in my mind, that loosening the dictatorial control, I don't like dictatorial control, I come from a family which is absolutely against that, hurt Russia and the Russian people. And obviously you're not recommending that. You're not recommending moving towards that. But would the move towards democracy, irrespective of Yeltsin, Gorbachev, are there any dangers in that?
Look, you are referring to the popular mythology, and it could be refuted by analyzing the facts and statistics from Russian history. The greatest economic success of my country, even if we're going back in history, was achieved at a time when the rulers offered democratization or liberalization. The great reform of Alexander II, starting from 1861, ending the feudal Russia and moving Russia into capitalism, and even introducing the institution of jurors, for instance. Then the forced reform of Nicholas II, unfortunately went halfway only in 1905, but Russia had a constitution. Not very sophisticated democracy, but in 1913, Russia had one of the highest GDP growths in the world. And the World War I actually was on the way of my country advancing into the future as constitutional monarchy. Now, going back to Gorbachev's years, it was a desperate attempt to save communist system, but it failed because it didn't work out. As one of my friends put it bluntly in 1985, the slaves couldn't build a powerful personal computer. So that's why Russia couldn't stay on par with the United States in a nuclear or missile equipment. And that's why Gorbachev's attempts to actually move forward without loosening up the control failed. Actually, the first Gorbachev speech in April 1995 was not about perestroika, but it was about acceleration. The first year, at least in his office, he tried to accelerate Soviet military-industrial complex. Total failure. And then he had to move to the political liberalization. But up to his last day in the office, he believed that the communism could be resurrected in some form of a more advanced political system without actually giving up control of the life of Soviet then and now Russian society. Now, Yeltsin's years are often referred as economic disaster. And again, the facts, official statistics will refute it if you start analyzing it, not year by year, but decade by decade. Gorbachev faced a collapse of the oil prices. Sounds familiar, huh? And the Russian economy went down, Soviet economy, because there was not enough cash to support very ambitious international agenda and this huge party apparatus and military and KGB apparatus. Yeltsin inherited a country that was literally bankrupt. So if we look at the Yeltsin's years, yes, those were not very, very successful years, but Russia survived. Russia actually gained some economic potential and some confidence. Also, I think that the roots of Putin's mismanagement are lying in the Yeltsin's years because of the oligarchs, because of the corruption and the mixture of power and business. But in Yeltsin's years, we had a free press, we had very weak democratic foundations which could serve for the future democracy in the country. And when in 1998, Russia faced the default of the ruble, followed by the collapse of the Asian markets, it recovered very quickly. it's wrong to say that Putin's rule restored Russian economic growth. Actually, if you look at the official numbers, the first year of growth was in 1999, and the highest growth in Russia, 10% of GDP, was in the year 2000, which you can hardly assign to Putin's management. Now, in the year 2000, we just analyzed it. Russian economy was a vibrant economy showing the highest growth of GDP, the highest industrial growth, almost 12%, with the oil prices $20 a barrel. Today, Russian economy is facing disaster with oil prices almost $50 a barrel. And it's after 8 years of phenomenal situation in the oil market and the energy market, which helped Russia to accumulate hundreds of billions of dollars in reserves. So something went wrong. If the economy, which was functioning and very much alive at $20 a barrel, now is about to collapse at $50 a barrel. So it's a long story, but the criminal mismanagement of Mr. Putin and his cronies didn't help my country. And we are facing now, I think, the end of the story, because more and more Russian people recognize that only transparency can give us some control of these funds accumulated during Putin's years, thanks to these very high oil prices. And the difference between 2009 and 1993, that even the communist or nationalist groups in Russia, they recognize that free and fair elections is the vital ingredient of the successful Russia. And I want to emphasize again, we believe that if Putin continues to rule Russia, my country will cease to exist, because the way he handles it threatens the existence of Russia.
My name is Evgeny Bezek. I am a Russian journalist. Mr. Kasparov.
Can you say what you're Russian journalist from?
I'm a RIA Novosti,
RIA
news
Novosti.
agency.
That's an official agency.
Mr. Kasparov, you are talking about bringing the change into Russia. And as Mr. Sibel has rightly mentioned or observed, that these changes, people are frightened of that change. Previously, it has brought about turmoil in the country. Perhaps the lack of the civil society, or the civil society which was not formed, also contributed to a failure, we may say, of development. As you have referred to the Salt March by Mahatma Gandhi, he was raising people by a very simple question: a right to do some small thing, to get a salt on its own land. And he was not inspiring to people by, in foreign countries, just to say we should have election or we should have this type of constitution. It came only in 1950. So what I would like to know, if the Russian opposition, perhaps in the year 2009, it is a year which would be good to change the opposition and address the needs of people to make it popular. At this moment, I'm sorry to say, the opposition is not having such a big popular support. We are having a small town near Moscow, Khimki, and there is a beautiful forest. And there is a highway which is planned to be built there. The civil society is emerging. People come out of houses just trying to stop this building against the bureaucratic machine. Small thing. But we don't see the opposition supporting them. They are left all alone. We can have many other examples of that. If it will be changed.
Just to follow up to this story just told by a Russian journalist about this small town, actually it's a part of big Moscow, Khimki, and a beautiful forest. Yeah, he just failed to tell you, an important element of this story. The man, the editor of the small local independent newspaper, was beaten nearly to death after leading this protest. This is a small issue, local issue, beaten to death. And of course, Russian police failed to find those who committed this crime, as Russian police failed to find those who killed Anna Politkovskaya, and I can continue the list. I understand that this reference that Mr. Kasparov is complaining about Russia abroad. I'm very happy to speak in my native tongue on Russian television or at your agency, which constantly rejected my requests and requests of my colleagues to run a simple press conference, paid press conference, at the premises of RIA Novosti. Let's open the debate. I'm very happy to talk about all the issues you raised, but I believe that the biggest issue today is to find out why hundreds of billions of dollars are wasted to support Putin's friends oligarchs, why money from Russian pension funds, the so-called Fund of National Welfare, is given to prevent the bankruptcy of Putin's buddies instead of supporting Russian people. Let's talk about it. There are many issues. If you have problems with my position, tell me that. Again, I'm very happy to conduct discussion in our native tongue. I believe I can manage it better than Mr. Putin and Mr. Medvedev. What I want is a dialogue. If you believe opposition is weak, give us a chance to talk. And don't hide behind the walls.
Well, Mr. Kasparov, my name is Bobby Seigel. I enjoyed your talk. The question that I have is, we're hearing all these negatives about Mr. Putin, and I'm neither a supporter of his, nor do I know much about your opposition, apart from the fact that you're a great world chess champion. My question is, Mr. Putin did arrest Mr. Khodorkovsky, who had a very large oil company, and evidently the claim against him was that he had siphoned away all the funds overseas, and what Mr. Putin was trying to do was bring all those funds back to Russia. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's quite a long story, and of course, Mr. Putin's intention had nothing to do with bringing these funds back to Russia. Now, the Khodorkovsky empire was divided among Mr. Putin's friends, and if you look at the structure of company Rosneft, which inherited most of the Khodorkovsky's Yukos empire, technically it's state-run, but it's in the hands of Mr. Igor Sechin, who is one of the closest Putin's allies, friends from St. Petersburg. And if Yukos was the most successful company in Russia by far, paid more taxes than any other Russian oil company on a barrel of oil. Let me emphasize it, more. And Khodorkovsky, by the way, was jailed for not paying enough taxes. Statistics showed us that he paid more than any other company. It was by far the most transparent company. And Khodorkovsky is in jail now because he was trying to pay taxes, because he was trying to change the relations between private companies and Russian state, something which is deadly for Mr. Putin's formula of controlling these companies via state-appointed officials. The Rosneft is one of the biggest, alongside with Gazprom, disasters. If you look at the corporate debt accumulated by Rosneft, by the cost of a barrel of oil, I mean, you will be amazed. You will be amazed. They are given all sorts of tax breaks. The Russian state supported the so-called purchase of Yukos. And if you look at even their IPO in London, it was the most amazing thing. Just imagine you have a 100% state-owned company which sells 10% of its equity to other investors. And it gets almost $10 billion for that. If the state sells, money should go to the state treasury. Wrong. This $10 billion went into the hands of Mr. Sechin, back to Rosneft. It's just one of the examples. And we can have a long list of that. And Rosneft, of course, is only second to Gazprom. There is a report written by Boris Nemtsov, an ex-deputy prime minister of Russia, and Vladimir Milov, a very prominent economist, also worked for the government a few years ago. They report about Putin's years, and one of them called Putin and Gazprom. They proved, and again, I say proved, it's on paper. I'm sure they might be wrong, but the actual claim is that Mr. Putin and his cronies removed from Gazprom at least $60 billion of cash and other material assets. The Russian official press never confronted it. It's already several months available in Russia, on Russian internet, and it's a total silence. I'm sure, Mr. Putin has something to say, but in the normal country, you have to respond. This is not, a small case. It talks about the Russian largest company. And as I say, these examples, can be added one by another.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kasparov. I think we have to finish here because I was asked to wind up at 4 o'clock and we have gone past by a couple of minutes.
maybe would like, if it's the last statement, I would like to make a few comments about your remarks about Russian foreign policy.
I don't know if the organizers think that there is time, if you think...
It will be very short.
All right. Please,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
Again, we're dealing, in my view, with the popular mythology that there is a huge resentment against United States and Europe and Russia. Actually, you know, if you look at the map and the political entities or countries surrounding Russia, so you can have United States, which is almost everywhere on the map, Europe, the world of Islam in the south of Russia, and China in the east. Every poll and in my own experience shows that Russians are feeling well about United Europe. So it has almost no rejection in the minds of Russians. It's a great social model Russian people appreciate, and Europe as an economic political entity considered to be sort of the greatest friend, potentially greatest friend of Russia. Yes, Russians have animosity toward the United States, and that was inherited from the Cold War. But it's no doubt, if you talk to Russians, if you stop this nonsense on state television, if you go beyond this official propaganda, Russians consider that the greatest threat to our country comes not from the United States, but from China. This is the only country that has territorial claims to our country. And I visited many Russian cities in the east of our country. I was in Vladivostok, in Nakhodka, in Irkutsk, in Ulan-Ude, and people there are frightened by the future, because a few years from now, it may not be Russia anymore. I heard a very sad joke in Irkutsk about Chinese crossing Russian border in small groups, 100,000 each. It's a serious... It is a real problem, and it's matched with another threat from the radical Islam, because we have the North Caucasus, which probably now lives not, under Russian law. Putin is proudly talking about pacification of Chechnya, but in fact, Chechnya is almost independent now, because we are paying ransom for Ramzan Kadyrov, the strongman in Chechnya, to be part of Russia. Billions of dollars every year. Let's say we stop doing that. And we shouldn't forget that in that part of Russia, we have the most capable military force, much stronger than the Russian army, which is almost ruined. So when you start analyzing the future foreign perspective of our country, and that's where the Russian opposition, even the left-wing nationalists, agree with liberals that recognizing the threat from China, recognizing the problems that the Russian Far East and Russian Eastern Siberia are facing, recognizing the potential dangers from the radical Islam, those challenges that should be met, and we must stop, this useless confrontation with the United States, which is competitor, but not an enemy threatening our territorial integrity. So that's why we're saying the Putin's regime, which is, in our view, selling down, almost literally, because recently they gave up 2 islands, without referendum, without the official decision of the parliament. The 2 islands were given to China, making Khabarovsk, also, part of this China's backyard. So we think that this policy is suicidal, and changing the foreign policy and just recognizing that we have important challenges to meet and to cope with is absolutely vital. And it could be achieved only by starting the public debate. We believe that public debate will show the wrongdoings of Putin's both domestic and foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you.